Morning, everybody. This cold, frosty winter's morning. And welcome. My name is Pauline Grove Jones, and I am the chair for this committee. If you haven't attended one of these meetings before, I'll now ask the officers to introduce themselves. So starting on my left.
Good morning, my name is Jeff Lyon. I'm the development manager at North Norfolk.
Morning, I'm Darrell Watson, one of the development management team leaders.
Good morning, I'm Lauren Gregory, Democratic Services Officer.
Good morning, Davina Romain, Senior Environmental Protection Officer, Environmental Protection Team.
Good morning, Fiona Croxton, in-house council solicitor.
The officers provide us with technical information and will be presenting the reports. And in front of me are a rather sparse number at the moment. We seem to have quite a lot of people off sick, the members of the committee who will be asking questions for each of the applications. Before we start, I'd just like to tell you that if the fire alarm goes off, it's for real. So please don't run, because I'm sure most of you won't, but exit in a steady way through the fire exits that you can see. There will be officers on duty. Do not use the lift, exit by stairs and go down to the front or the rear of the building. If you have mobile phones with you, could I ask you to switch them to silent or switch them off completely? If we're still in session at 11, there'll be a small break for comfort and coffee. Right, I'll now pass over to Lauren. Could I have the apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Nigel Lloyd, Councillor Gerard Mancini-Boyle, Councillor Nigel Pearce, and Councillor Andrea Susimi.
And substitutes?
We have one substitute member, Councillor John Toy.
Councillor Toy substituting for?
He's substituting for Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you. Item 4, the minutes. I'm always making an assumption that you've read through the minutes for the last meeting of the 24th. Are there any queries on this one?
Madam Chairman, there's no minutes.
Oh no,
because the last meeting, this is a reserve meeting and the meeting was so recently. It's just a note to members to say that the minutes will be circulated at a later date.
that was clever of you, wasn't it? Because I read this, it says bringing to the 22nd. Right, okay. So there are no minutes. Oh, good. Items of urgent business, are there any?
There are no items of urgent business.
Right. The order of business will be as stands. And can I please ask the members any declarations of interest here? Yes, Councillor Holiday.
Madam Chair, item 8, predisposed but not predetermined. Thank you.
Anybody else? Right. We now go straight to the off. Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, item 9, Madam Chairman. I am a customer and it is my ward, so I will decline from voting as I have been lobbied quite consistently.
Right. Okay.
Madam Chair, I think we've morning everyone, by the way. I think we've all received an email from Mr. Tarsi a couple of days ago, and I'm just checking that every member of the committee has received that. And so I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was going to mention that anyway, but you preempted me. So we go now to item 8, Weybourne application PF/22/1885, pages 7 to 12, and Officer Watson is presenting.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the erection of single-storey front and rear extensions and the rendering of the property. The property is a bungalow known as Heathview on Holt Road in Weybourne. There are no updates to the report. The main considerations are set out on page 9, being whether the proposed development is acceptable in principle, the effect on the character and appearance of the existing dwelling and the surrounding area, the effect on the living conditions of the occupiers of neighbouring dwellings, whether the proposed development would result in a detrimental impact on the surrounding landscape, noting the fact that the site is within the AONB, and finally, the impact of the proposed development on highway safety and parking. The concerns raised in representations and by the parish council relate to overdevelopment, the effect on neighbouring dwellings, light pollution, the proximity of the extension to the shared driveway, render being different to other buildings in the vicinity, lack of parking for a holiday let, increased traffic and cars having to reverse out into the road. Detailed consideration of the main issues and concerns raised within the report. Officers are satisfied that the proposed development complies with all relevant planning policies and is therefore acceptable. But I'll just run through the presentation now, a copy of which you should have received previously. This first slide shows a general location close to the southern edge of the village on Holt Road, and sitting at the edge of a built-up area. The site is within the designated settlement boundary for Weybourne and is also within a designated residential area. This slide shows the site in more detail. The axis is on the north side of the site here, which is shared with Beach Home, the dwelling immediately to the east, which is there. To the northeast is a block of 3 garages, one of which is associated with the dwelling and is within the application site, which is that little piece there. This slide is with the aerial photograph overlaid. The dwelling is just to the west of the centre of the site here. The driveway runs to the north and wraps around to the east side of the dwelling and leading through to access Beach Home. You can see the amenity area and rear garden that runs to the rear of the dwelling to the south, which is known as Lee Cottage. This slide shows a wider aerial context view and helps to show other dwellings with rear and side conservatories with glazed roofs, including a dwelling just to the north of the site. Here, the site being denoted by the star there. This slide shows a proposed block plan with the 2 extensions labelled and the 3 parking spaces. So that's the front extension, that's the rear with the roof lantern, there's the 3 parking spaces. These are the existing elevations. As we can see, it's a fairly typical mid-20th century bungalow. There's the small flat roofed extension to the east rear has been removed already prior to the application being submitted, I believe. This is a 3D axonometric view of the dwelling as existing. This section here was the rear elevation prior to the removal of this little rear extension here. This slide shows the existing floor plans. Now turning to the proposed elevations, the top is the south, which would face the boundary with Lee Cottage. The bottom is the west front elevation, that would face Holt Road. The front extension has a pitched roof, and the rear extension has a flat roof. So that's the front extension, and that's the rear extension looking from the side, and that's the front extension, and that's the bit of the rear extension that projects beyond the existing side gable. Now to the north elevation, which is one at the top of this slide, which would face the access. At the bottom is the east rear elevation, where the glazed doors would be located there. That's the extent of the extension there, and that's the roof lantern. And that's a proposed 3D axonometric view of the the dwelling. It's the same as angle as the existing one. So this is the rear extension. This is the existing dwelling here, and that is the front extension. This is a proposed floor plan showing the extensions. This sort of pinky area here, that's the rear, and that section there is the front. Now look, just a few photos of the site. This is the existing front of the property taken from Holt Road. This is the north elevation as you're coming into the access with the garages, the garage block to the rear, and then the access to Beechhome continues round there. And that's a little bit further into the access. That's just the northern gable of the dwelling. There's the end of the block of garages, the rear garden to the dwelling, and that's the property known as Beechhome to the east. Again, just a little bit further around still, showing the access into Beechhome itself, part of the rear garden where the close board fence is, and that's to the application dwelling and the end of the block of garages. That's the rear elevation of the dwelling, where that you can see where the small single-story extension used to sit. The garden continuing off into this direction here behind Lee Cottage, and that's another the sort of view directly of the rear elevation of the dwelling, showing it in context with the neighbouring dwelling to the south. And that's looking back out of the access, because we were previous slide, we were sort of looking in down here to the access into Beechhome. So that's looking out, and you go through there, and that takes you out onto the Holt Road. This is the rear elevation of the dwelling. And this is the street view from Holt Road looking north. The front extension would sit here, but I think in this view the rear extension would be barely visible, if at all. And then that's looking southwards along Holt Road. The front extension would sit in here, but it wouldn't project out as far as the dwelling Lee Cottage, so it's unlikely to have any harmful impact on the street scene. And then the rear extension will sort of sit in this sort of be seen in this context here, but set back, so again would be barely visible. So this is just a reminder of the main issues again, and finally this is the recommendation for approval subject to conditions to cover those matters listed on the slide. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Darrell. I now go to the town parish representative, Councillor Charlie Harrison. Would you like to come up, please? Please, if you wouldn't mind, Fiona, Casey.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes from the time you start, and the phone will go.
Right.
Because the egg time has given up.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm here on behalf of Waverham Parish Council to discuss the application before us. Our concerns are that a considerable increase in footprint is proposed. A significant increase in glazing, including a large roof light compromising the AONB's dark skies policy. Insufficient parking, only 3 bays when there are 4 bedrooms. Does this application comply with local policies EN1 and HO8? Because it certainly doesn't look like it. You state all development will be designed to a high standard, reinforcing local distinctiveness, innovation and energy efficient design will be particularly encouraged. Design which fails to regard in local context does not preserve or enhance the character and quality of an area will not be acceptable. The scale of the extension, the rendering of the exterior and the glazing facing the countryside does not preserve or enhance the area. to ensure that all new extensions have regard to the appearance and character of their host building. The extension will radically alter the appearance and character of the host building. The extension will have a detrimental effect on the quality of neighbours, especially light pollution, noise and proximity. The proposed extension is very close to shared driveways with concerns regarding access for emergency vehicles to properties to the rear. The development is too big, out of scale, in a quiet residential area. The rendering is different to the other buildings. The property is in a prominent position and it will be seen from the Heath, which is a huge tourist attraction with the steam railway. Increasing traffic, cars will have to reverse out onto a busy road. Just because you have granted planning permission in the past does not mean you have to this time. Policy changes, as well as the attitudes of neighbours and the parish council. We now have a far better understanding of light pollution, traffic, etc. in our community. And the traffic on that road is building all the time. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat, please. We have no objecting speaker, but we have a supporting speaker, Mr. Christopher Harwood, if you'd like to come up, please. You're on. Oh, I haven't got your name down. Did someone? No. Well, it appears that none of us have had any of these emails. Yes, who did you send them to?
Your democratic service of the email that I was receiving the emails and been trying to send it to you, and I responded by I can check the email situation.
Yes, I'm sorry about this, that we don't seem to have had it, but I will allow you to speak. If you could come up, please, and just tell us who you are. This is most unusual because if you've sent them through and you're quite happy to show them, then that's.
Yeah, I'll happily show you the various emails
I don't
and
disbelieve
discussions.
you.
So thank you.
And your name is, if you could just tell us.
Lyndon Swift, Lyndon. I'm chair of the parish council, but I'm actually here objecting to the
okay.
application.
Okay.
The the NPPF 2018 has a commitment to conserving and enhancing the natural environment, including protecting and enhancing protected landscapes, including AONBs, and recognising the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. This application sits directly on the side of the Heath. The photos and the videos that I sent to the council would have shown you this. However, they're obviously not available. HO8 proposals to extend or replace existing dwellings within the areas designated as countryside will be permitted, provided that the proposal would not materially increase the impact of the dwelling on the appearance of the surrounding countryside. This looks directly onto Kelling Heath, hence the name of the property, Heath View. So when you're looking down from Kelling Heath, which is an internationally recognised dark sky discovery site, this is one of the properties that you will see. It also says that you would not result in disproportionately large increase in the scale of the original dwelling. This is almost double the size of the original dwelling. Since the current local plan was made, no other roof lights or conservatories or anything else have been built south facing to Kelling Heath or the countryside. And this building is countryside on two sides, to the north and to the west. EN2 proposals for development should be informed and be sympathetic to the distinctive character. White rendering on a road that is all red brick bungalows is not going to be sympathetic with the area at all. It also states the nocturnal character. Roof lights are providing an impact of light pollution on a dark sky discovery site. You can't say a little bit's okay. It states it should be protect, conserve, and where possible, enhance. So even a minimal amount is not doing that. It is causing pollution. EN4 states that car parking is discreet and accessible. This won't be discreet and accessible. This is on the front of the building now, where it's grass at the moment, and will be onto almost a blind bend, which you would have seen, but you can't because they haven't got the videos. EN6, sustainable construction and energy efficiency. Up-facing glazing is less energy efficient than wall glazing by up to 40%, meaning you are going to be using more energy. It doesn't sit well with a carbon footprint. EN9, biodiversity and geology.
Thank you, Mr. Swift.
Can I just please note that it is appalling that you don't have the photos or anything, and it's therefore not going to be postponed to another time due to the ineptitude of NNDC.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
noted.
It's a surprise.
Right, okay. We will make inquiries about that because our democratic services. Yes, of course, you're entitled to. We'll now carry on for the supporting speaker. Mr. Harwood, if you'd like to come up, please. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Harwood, owner of Heathview, Weybourne, and I am the applicant. Thank you for the opportunity to give my reasons in support of this application. I'm keen to advise we have considered our immediate neighbour to the rear of the property, Beach Home, who has access across our drive. We decided to move the car park into the front of the property to avoid vehicle movements adjacent to our neighbour to improve their privacy. To clarify, vehicles will enter the site in forward gear, manoeuvre on site and exit in forward gear. So there are no concerns from a highways perspective. We have recently removed a large shed from the site, which was positioned hard on the boundary, where we propose a rear extension of kitchen and living space. The extension is to be built further away from the boundary than the removed shed. The rear extension has minimal impact on the street scene, being recessive with only a narrow gap to the side of the building. With only minor amendment, the rear extension could actually be built under permitted development. The only impact viewed from the road is the small front extension of an additional bedroom. Similar front extensions are a common form of development in many North Norfolk villages, and it is hoped would not be a planning concern. We are keen to have a minimal impact on the environment and are replacing the previous oil tank located to the rear of the property with an energy efficient air source heat pump system, solar panels mounted on the rearward roof elevation, and an electric vehicle charging point. We wish to also freshen the appearance of the property by rendering the dated and bland brickwork. We believe we are permitted to do this without planning approval, as we are not in a conservation area. Again, there are many examples of similar properties in the district. The planning officer believes his proposal complies with all current planning policy, and it is hoped you will follow their recommendation of approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat. I now ask the local member, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, ma'am. I find it difficult to see how this proposal conforms to local plan policies HO 8, EN 149 and paragraph 185 of the NPPF. The extensions result in an increase of 90% of the footprint of the dwelling. How can this comply with HO 8, which requires that extension would not result in a disproportionately large increase in the scale of the original dwelling? This policy states that in determining what constitutes a disproportionately large increase, account will be taken of the existing dwelling, the extent to which it could be extended under permitted development rights, and the prevailing character of the area. The existing dwelling is modest and surrounding dwellings are proportionate. I agree with the representations which say the scale of the proposed extension is about double the size of the existing property and the size of the completed bungalow is out of scale. This proposal approximately doubles the glazing on the south elevation, triples the glazing on the east elevation, and adds a roof lantern on the new rear extension. How can this increase in glazing comply with EN1, which states that proposals that have an adverse effect on the special qualities of the AONB will not be permitted, and paragraph 185 of the NPPF, which requires that new development limits the impact of light pollution on intrinsically dark landscapes? Just because the new glazing is at the rear of the building doesn't prevent light pollution, which will adversely impact the Kelling Heath Dark Skies Discovery Site, which is within shouting distance. How can this comply with EN4, that a proposal that should not have significantly detrimental effect on the residential amenity of nearby occupiers? These single-story extensions may not overshadow next-door dwellings, but the rear extension is in very close proximity, 0.8 of a metre, to the southern neighbour. I echo the objection, will come right up to the edge of a neighbour's boundary. Render is not commonplace in the village, and none of the surrounding dwellings have rendered. So if this were to take regard of its immediate setting, render would be inappropriate. How does this conform to the North Norfolk Design Guide? I echo the objections. Why does anybody think a rendered property would fit in, and the finish is totally different? How can this comply with CT5 when the number of bedrooms is increasing to 4 and the parking requires reversing onto what is described as a busy road? I accept what's just been said. I echo the objection that this road is very busy and there's an accident waiting to happen, and that the increased traffic will impact on this small site and busy road. I don't see any compliance with EN9, which requires development proposals to protect the biodiversity of land and buildings and incorporate beneficial biodiversity conservation features where appropriate. A biodiversity-rich hedge has been removed, which didn't require planning permission, but there seems no mention of a planting scheme to replace this or to mitigate the development. If this application is approved, I would expect conditions around the use of reduced visible light transmission factor glass, for example, 0.5 for the large areas of glazing and less than 0.4 for the roof lantern, as recommended in other AONBs, and controls on external lighting. I would also like to see a planting plan and other biodiversity-rich features such as bird boxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. I now go over to the members who would like to speak on this one. Councillor Brown, Councillor Tillotson, Fitztillett. Don't ask me to do that. I should be doing it. And then Councillor Heinrich. Andrew, please.
I just want to raise a point of order, really. I see in the paragraph under the heading whether the proposed development is acceptable in principle on page 9, that the site is located within Weybourne's designated settlement boundary. So I think I'm correct, but I would welcome confirmation that policy HO8 does not apply to this property, because policy HO8 is relevant only to properties in designated countryside. And I just want to highlight that countryside in planning terms has a special meaning. It doesn't mean that every open landscape is automatically countryside under the policies that relate to development in the countryside. So it's important to bear that in mind. Therefore, I would expect any extensions up to 50% of the ground area of the property are permissible under planning policy. It may be useful to consider the extent to which permitted development allows extensions on this application as compared to what is proposed, what the margin of increase, if you like, is. But short of that, I'm very open-minded on supporting this application at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Tillotson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Speak as Vice Chairman of the Norfolk Coast Partnership, which is the governing body of the area of outstanding natural beauty. And I have to support Councillor Holiday in her concerns in respect of light pollution. And I would like, please, that there are definite recommendations or requests that there is no extra light polluting into the sky or over the open countryside to the rear. Also, I do regret the hedge removal. And I realise that it's not a material consideration. However, I do so hope that people will respect that they are in a countryside area, that our wildlife relies on hedging, and to remove them is actually a great shame.
Thank you. Wish to speak, Jeff?
Just for you to confirm the position that councillor Brown asked about, is this site in the countryside, designated countryside under policy SS2? The site isn't in the countryside, it's in this residential area. So policy HO8 wouldn't be applicable to proposals in that area. So our main policy focus is compliance with things like policy EN4, EN1 and EN2 in terms of landscape impacts. And obviously making sure there's sufficient parking on site. Did you want to add anything, Daryl? You're in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of parking that's been raised, that that complies with the adopted standards in Appendix C of the core strategy. A 4-bedroom dwelling requires minimum of 3 parking spaces, which is being provided here. I could just answer Councillor Brown's question about what could be done as permitted development. Can we just put the slides back on, please? Just find the relevance. So as it stands, the rear extension is 5 metres deep. A development, rear extension to a detached property as permitted development could be done up to 4 metres deep. It couldn't project beyond the side elevation of the property because of the location. It could be, if it was it could be a conservatory, so fully glazed, and that would be permitted development. Or it could be, if it was, it would need to be permitted development as masonry. It would need to be of the external materials would have to be similar to those of the existing dwelling, and there won't be any limit to the number of glazed openings you could put in such an extension either. I don't know if that helps or not. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I just ask, this removal of the hedge, was permission required, or can the owner just remove it?
It was permission is not required. It was this short section of hedge here along this sort of splay. I'm not sure what species it was, but I don't understand it was a native species hedge, box hedge, which is obviously not a native hedge.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Heinrich.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we've got quite an issue here. I mean, clearly, as has just been explained, an extension within permitted development rights could go up, which could have much worse light pollution. So I don't think there is too much argument there. We could condition the type of glass to resolve that potential contention. It's a large extension, but it seems to me reasonably well designed and fits okay within the plot. It's a sizable plot. It could take a much bigger property. And the overall design, certainly from the road view, I think significantly improves the street scene. As far as the render is concerned, I think I can understand why render's proposed. I very much doubt it's feasible to get that brick, to build everything in the same exact brick. I know from recent experience that some bricks are now very, very difficult to get hold of. And we have to take that into consideration. It's not a planning matter, but I can understand why render. And there are other rendered properties in Webburn. To me, it's bringing a nondescript 70s or thereabouts bungalow into the 21st century and doing it with actually some quite reasonable style. I know people are not happy, but to me, overall, it's an improvement, and I'm happy to support the recommendation.
You're proposing. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, a lot of this, as usual, already been covered by other members and officers. I think we need to remember here as well that apart from the roof light, which I don't know what we can do about that, Veluxes and things we can, but do people sit around with all their windows open? You know, are they really ejecting light of a night time? Because when you've got somewhere that's been insulated and it's got the ground source heat pump, which means you need to keep your energy inside because they work at a lot lower temperature. You're going to be closing curtains and blinds and things to keep energy in. So, and as we've seen with the potential, it could be extended with things with even worse glazing. The fact that we've got some control over it now and the way it's done. So. I think on balance, I would have to support the officer's recommendation. I'm happy to second it.
You're seconded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Withington.
Thank you. I appreciate the concerns over the AONB and the light pollution, and it's a matter that's coming into us increasingly often. I know on some recent applications, and I think it was Wells, I'm sure Councillor Fitch-Tillett will confirm, we looked at a condition on the type of glass being used, and I don't know whether we could incorporate that or whether that's not possible. I'm not sure, but it would seem to alleviate some of the issues over light pollution if we can.
Jeff.
I mean, we have considered those issues in the past. I mean, the applicant's here, so I mean, I'm sure they could, if you're agreeable, Chairman, confirm whether that's something they would consider as part of the proposal. Because if we need to condition it, obviously we need to make sure the applicant doesn't give significant sort of development concerns to the applicant. But I don't think it's unreasonable. It would meet the test for conditions to impose something like that if it's to address a particular impact. So,
Mr. Harwood, what do you say to this? You agree? Right. Okay. So we have a condition to be added to for discussions about the type of glass that's put into your extensions. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Right, we now go to the vote, please, Lauren. This is proposed to accept the officer's recommendation to approve, proposed by Councillor Heinrich, seconded by Councillor Toy. And this is shown on page 12 of your agenda. Approval subject to the conditions plus the added condition about type of glass. For, against or abstain, please. Yes, Lauren.
Before we start, I will just add Councillor Taylor arrived after the introduction, so won't be able to vote on this item as he hasn't been given the full context.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
For.
Councillor Grove-Jones.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Toy.
For.
Councillor Withington. For. That is 8 votes for and 1 against.
Thank you. This is approved.
excuse me, sir. Leave the room, please, sir.
Excuse me, out.
Excuse me, silence. Leave the chamber, please.
Okay. Oh, I'm always doing that. Right, Joe.
Right, okay, so this is item 9 on page 13 of your agenda. So members may recall we did visit the site, I think it was back in July, it seems a long time ago now, but so we had a good look at the site and we went into the neighbouring property, number 13 Lutyens Drive, basically to see the relationship between the application site and the neighbouring dwelling. So since the site visit, officers in planning and environmental health have been working with the applicant and the agent to try and address some of the issues that were preventing a positive resolution. And those issues primarily centre on surfacing of the application site, discussions about HGV deliveries and forklift truck impacts and movements, and effectively confirming measures to reduce the adverse impacts. Now, not long after the site visits, the applicant acted to remove the gravel surface from the application site. I think you might remember from the discussions on the site, there was some concerns about the noise when vehicles were passing over it. So the applicant has now removed that. And in essence, we're left with a hardcore surface, which I understand needs to be rolled from time to time to sort of keep it in good order. In relation to addressing the impacts from HGVs and forklift trucks, the applicant has produced an updated noise impact assessment, which I've referred to in the committee papers, and they've also provided a revised layout plan. And I'll just sort of talk through if you can sort of get to the, yes, if you stay on that one, that's okay. So this is the plan that originally came in with the application. There were some concerns about this layout, which led to the first amendment. If we go on to the next slide. All right. So this is the layout that was with you when we went to the community site visit. So you can see there's a sort of a green landscape buffer as number 1 down the boundary with number 13 Lutyens Drive, and there was sort of inclusion at this point of a pedestrian link through to the application site next to the sort of north of the green buffer strip. There was proposed to be customer parking on the site at that point as well. So things have now changed. If you go on to the final revision, so this is the layout that's before committee today. So we're looking again, retention of that circa 9 metre wide landscape buffer. We've removed the pedestrian access from the site. In effect, this part of the site won't be accessible to customers. There's no public access to this area. It's in essence a storage area and a place for parking staff cars. So the pallet storage area is sort of the brown speckled area marked as number 4, and there's a 3 metre high acoustic fence that's proposed on the edge of the landscape buffer strip. So also since the application site visit, the applicant has acquired a new forklift truck for the site. There were some concerns about the noise impacts of the previous truck on the site. And a new forklift truck has been reflected in the noise assessments that have been produced by the applicants. Now, since the report was published, we have had some further updates. Overstrand Parish Council had asked for more time to respond. They said they weren't able to get their formal comments to us before the committee. I understand the representative from the Parish Council is here today to speak, so hopefully they'll be able to sort of convey their position. As you've probably noted from page 14 of the agenda, they were in support of the proposal. So they've sort of indicated their position on that. And obviously, as things have, hopefully the committee will agree that things have improved. Hopefully that support will still be the same. We've also had 6 public representations that have been received since the report was published. Many have repeated the concerns that are set out across pages 15 and 16 of the agenda, but some of them raise other sort of points, more specific points to the scheme before us. Comments include concerns that use of the land from 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening would disturb residents and would spoil the use of their home and the garden. Concerns that the application is not that dissimilar to the last scheme, apart from no public parking. And there's concerns that the new forklift truck is nearly as noisy as the old one, and the lorries are the same. Also had sort of comments that the proposal is still unacceptable in residents' view, but could be controlled with conditions. Suggestions that 8 till 6 p.m. Usage would cause a nuisance and disturb sleep and ruin enjoyment of gardens and properties. They're saying if conditions applied to staff parking should be 8:30 to 5:30 Monday to Saturday and 9:30 to 4:30 Sundays and bank holidays. And they're saying that lorry and forklift access should be restricted to 10 a.m. at the earliest and finished by 4 p.m. latest, Monday to Friday only. We're also saying any forklift or lorry movement at the weekend or bank holidays will cause an unacceptable loss of amenity. I've also had comments about the frequency of HGV deliveries and forklift use, suggesting controls to minimise the number of deliveries on the site. So the applicant's information sets out there will be 9 HGV deliveries across the year. And I'll come to the conditions in a minute, but we are proposing conditions to seek to limit the number of HGV traffic on the site. There's also comments about trying to reduce the frequency of hours of use. They said it won't, just having hours of use restriction on HGV movements wouldn't stop the potential for numbers to increase beyond 9. So there's concern for some residents that without controls, this could escalate to significant numbers of HGV movements. Obviously, that's not what the applicant's proposing, but I think neighbours are concerned that without control, this could become something bigger than what it is at the moment. So in terms of other concern and comments that we've had, so suggestions that non-HGV deliveries should reverse up the drive and not turn around on the application site. And I'll come to that point in a minute on conditions, because some conditions we can impose, some conditions wouldn't meet the sort of tests for reasonableness, and we can't just impose any condition, it has to sort of meet the sort of tests for that. So sometimes we'd like to impose stuff, but we can't always do it because it doesn't meet the tests. And in terms of noise nuisance comments, there's again concern about forklift activities on the site and a need for that to be controlled so that it doesn't impact unduly on those residents living nearby. And other comments have raised concerns, but their principal objection was to do with the hours of traffic and the likely frequency and number of HGV deliveries, hours of operation, and just wanted to make sure we impose conditions if we're minded to grant permission. So since the report was published, I did circulate a copy of conditions that have been drafted. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to read those. But if you just scroll past the recommendation, there's a number of these conditions, many of which are agreed now between the applicants and the council. There's a couple of points that I think are still in for discussion, and it ultimately is a matter for you as a committee as to how you want to deal with this point if you were minded to approve it. But it's the HGV hours of delivery that's still up for discussion. We're suggesting in the conditions pack, and that's condition 2 on the list. There's only 23 conditions this time, not quite as many as the last committee you were dealing with. But so condition 2, we're suggesting a 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday HGV delivery restriction. The applicant would prefer to see that as a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. They've conceded that there'll be no weekend or Sunday or bank holiday deliveries. And actually, having spoken with the Environmental Protection Officer, we could live with that change from a 9 till 5 on Monday to Friday only. So I think that point could be agreed. If we just go on to the next bit. Okay. So there's a long list of conditions, but some of those are requiring details to be provided to us. Others are to secure the implementation of those details that have been approved. I think there is one more condition where the hours of use is up for debate, and that's to do with the forklift truck hours of operation, which is condition 16 on the list. On mine, I've got 16.
That's the hours.
That's the hours. That's the hours of use to be agreed. So we're suggesting on there 10 till 4:30 Monday to Friday and 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Again, the applicant's asking whether they could be aligned aligned more with the HGV activities. We've agreed to a Saturday operation because we feel there may be times when you need to move stock from the storage area into the sites. But we're not expecting that to be a frequent activity because there will be no HGV deliveries during that time frame. So taking all this into consideration with the conditions, our recommendation is one of approval subject to those conditions before.
Thank you. Can I just ask, what was the conditioning for the material that will be laid in the back of on this particular site? Because it was the gravel which was causing so much problem.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some discussion with the applicant's agent about some of the conditions, and as you say, we don't at the minute have a written detail of exactly what's been laid down on the site. So that condition was really just to secure confirmation that it is a hardcore surface, that maintenance requires that to be rolled, I don't know, every 4 months or 6 months, whatever. This just so we got confirmation what the surface actually is, and then we can make sure that's retained thereafter. Because you're right, we wouldn't want gravel brought onto the site at a later date. That could then introduce noise that we tried to resolve.
Okay, thank you.
So there's quite a lot of belt and braces type conditions, you probably would say, but and that's we're just trying to make sure we sort of meet the aims of the applicant, but also try and recognise the concerns that neighbours have raised. So we're trying to meet that to the common ground, middle point between the two.
Have you all read, members, the conditions, the 23 conditions, please? Okay, I now go to the parish council speaker, Councillor Gordon Partridge, if you'd like to come up. Me?
I take your mind, I'm so sorry.
No.
I do apologise.
We've got a problem then with our, can we just hold on for, could you just come in a second?
Sorry, I'm so sorry to disturb you.
What's happening? People, please. Yeah.
So sorry.
Suspending proceedings, please, for 5 minutes. We are having a problem downstairs. Apologies to everyone for the delay. We're now ready to commence again. I don't think we need to go through the application presentation because we'd actually got to Mr. Partridge, who was just about to give his presentation. If you'd like to come up. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Partridge, as you know. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Obviously, we, as has been alluded to, we have been in support of the garden centre's application to continue the use of the land at the rear. And we are really recognising the fact that also, of course, the people living in Lutchens Drive do have a right to the quiet enjoyment of their dwelling. So it comes down in the finish really to a balancing act, as ever with these things. We do support the garden centre as being a significant asset to the village. It provides a good service to the village. So we have, taken the view that in principle, we do support them. And I will say today, now that we do continue that support. But we also recognise that there are issues there and that the garden centre has shown it is willing to undertake measures to try and mitigate any perceived nuisance. And I'm sure if permission is granted and they are allowed to put in the provisions that they say they will, there can be a degree of fine tuning over time to make sure that they want to be the best neighbours they can be, but rights on one side always have to be balanced by rights on the other. The main concern for the parish council would be that if there's any significant restriction on the use of the land at the rear, then we could end up with a significant amount of parking on the main road, which is the coast road that runs through the village. This is a village which already has significant parking problems. And as you can imagine, in summer months, that's a very, very busy road. And we wouldn't want to see any parking on there if it can be avoided. And in particular, we wouldn't want to see any lorries being unloaded there because the road safety risk would be considerable. So, as I say, it is a balancing act, but on balance, we do support the efforts of the garden centre to mitigate any perceived nuisances and any impacts that they are having on neighbours. But, we have to balance that out as you will have to do, when you come to your decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. If you'd like to return to your seat. I now have an objecting speaker, Mr. Tassie. If you'd like to come up, please. Apologies again for rather disruptive morning, but still.
I live in Lutchens Drive, directly beside the garden centre, and would like to comment on the application. I've also been asked to comment on behalf of neighbours who are unable to attend today. Most Lutchens Drive residents moved into their homes 4 or 5 years ago, and although the application site was being used for ad hoc parking, our gardens were quiet and we could relax in our homes. Around 2 years ago, the use of the land intensified considerably, with lorries being unloaded by a diesel telehandler and stock being stored, then moved into the garden centre sales area or loaded into delivery vans. The noise and visual impact is more like an industrial estate than a quiet conservation area. As well as spoiling the enjoyment of our gardens, the noise is loud enough to force us and neighbours to close windows at times, hence several noise complaints and objections to this application. At times we've had to literally leave our house and go for a walk to get away from the noise. Several hours forklifting on Good Friday this year, and I found my wife in tears and we went out. In addition to the noise, the visual aspect of the bright plastic wrapped pallets and lorry drivers staring into our home has been quite depressing. Not what we expected, or indeed what we experienced when we first moved to Overstrand. The concessions offered by the applicant are a good improvement. However, their noise assessment still accepts that the noise will exceed acceptable levels, especially at our first floor windows. The proposed 3-metre fence won't screen the large lorries who can see over the top basically into our home. Weather permitting, in the summer we eat on our patio. However, the past 2 years we've been disturbed by cars, lorries and forklifts from as early as 7:15 in the morning through till 6:30 in the evening. The proposed operational hours of 8 to 6 would still cause issues. So we'd ask for a condition to restrict staff parking to half an hour before public opening and 30 minutes after closing, which seems to us to be fair. Lorries and forklift create most of the noise, so we feel restricting from 10 to 4 on weekdays only would be more acceptable, provided the number of unloads and forklift use can be restricted to current levels. In addition to the HGVs unloading on site.
That's time.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Sorry,
Darcy,
I didn't speak quick enough, did I? Apologies, but I won't shout and swear at anybody. Okay.
Thank you so much. If you can return to your seat. I think a lot of what you were speaking came round in your email yesterday. Yes, thank you. Do you want to say anything now, Jeff? Just some of the points.
Only to say that, I mean, I did actually circulate a copy of the conditions to Mr. Tassie, just so he was aware of what we were proposing to consider. And a lot of the concerns that I think he's raised, we have tried to cover within those conditions. So, and there is a particular condition on agreeing the pallet storage scheme. I think it's condition 12. So we have tried to address particular shrink wrap concern that was raised on the site visit about the blue colour reflecting back into properties. So, yeah. I think we've covered most of the points that Mr. Tassie.
Thank you. I now have the sporting speaker, Mr. Presley, who's the agent. Would you like to come up, please? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Alan Presley of Cornerstone Planning on behalf of the applicant. Overstrand Garden Centre has existed for over 50 years, and the application site sits immediately to the rear of the main garden centre and has been used ancillary to it. The application seeks to regularise that arrangement, as we've heard this morning. There is support for the application and indeed the business as an asset of the community, including, as we've heard, from the parish council. Objections have been raised from residents of the subsequent housing development to the west of the garden centre. Now, as Mr. Lyne has indicated, members visited the site back in July of this year, and we trust we're able to see the site's operation and understand how the applicant proposes to manage the site in conjunction with the rest of the garden centre. Taking on board the feedback from some of the issues discussed then and subsequently, the applicant removed the gravel from the site, commissioned a further noise assessment and a site management plan, including the layout or the latest layout which you've seen this morning. The applicant also purchased a new and quieter forklift. The proposals include, as we've heard, setting aside a 9-metre landscape buffer zone between the site and the houses, erecting a 3-metre acoustic fence between the site and the landscape buffer, additional gates and signage to preclude public access to the application site, and limiting storage and parking to designated areas. It's helpful that Mr. Lyne confirmed matters in relation to conditions, and I think most of those have been resolved to our satisfaction. There are 2 or 3 on which I'd like to raise some small points, but rather than use up my 3 minutes, Chairman, I wondered perhaps whether we could return to those subsequently, if that would be acceptable.
Yes, just.
So in summary, the applicant has gone to great lengths to ensure that the application site is and will be managed in such a way as to minimise any potential for disturbance. We trust the committee will support the application and in doing so, the continued viability of the business as an important community asset, whilst ensuring that all the conditions of planning permission are necessary and reasonable, but not unduly onerous. I'm accompanied by the applicant and acoustic consultant, and we are collectively happy to answer any further questions the committee might have, particularly in relation to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. It's actually, the list of conditions does actually say it's in draft form and subject to change. So we still have some discussion to be carried out. I now go to the local member, Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Yeah, good morning again, Chairman, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. This has been one of the longest applications I think I've had in my ward for some time. But I have to stress the necessity for the garden centre to continue. It's not just servicing the local village, it's a very important part of the local economy. And I really have to congratulate the applicant, his agent, and his advisors for actually working so hard to try and get this right for all of us. And I'd also like to thank officers because this has taken a very, very long time. Now, as you've heard, I am a customer quite frequently. I don't know what I'd do without it, so I will not be voting in this. But I would ask members to please support this. As we've heard, has been going for 50 years. It's a super business. It's got a great offer of all types now, and we really would like it to continue. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Do you wish to speak, or are you okay with this? Yes.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. Davina Remain, one of the environmental protection officers in the environmental protection team. So I look at noise and disturbance, and I would like to be, I'd like to answer any of the queries that anybody may have today as well. I have been involved in looking at this from a nuisance perspective, as well as assessing the planning application itself. I've been working very hard with my planning colleagues and also wider with the agents as well to see if we can address these issues by condition. I think we're almost all the way there at the moment. I'm looking at my colleague just to see that I think we had a final draft that was revised last night, and I think we're almost there to the point where we're happy with everything. I would reiterate that if the situation was the other way around and we were looking at the residential estate being put in next to this premises, this business, it's extremely likely that at least one of the properties would not have been built in that location, and others, the layout would have been much different. So it's important that we have the appropriate protective measurements in place to ensure that local residential amenity can be achieved. And also I'm very mindful that it is an operational garden centre, and it has intentions to expand and be successful, and therefore we have been considering this within the conditions themselves. So that if there's any further queries, I'm more than happy to answer those as we go through. Okay. Thank you,
Davina. I now go to members, and first one wishing to speak is Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak as also portfolio holder for sustainable growth. This business is an asset to the community and widespread. Businesses are suffering enormously at the moment, and this is really encouraging to see a business actually prospering. I would like to thank the agents and our officers for working together on a very comprehensive set of recommendations, which I think cover most of the issues. And I think it's very heartening to see this happening more and more frequently. I do understand the concerns of local residents, but I think most of their concerns should be addressed by the set of conditions. And as a result, I'm happy to propose acceptance.
Thank you. You're proposing acceptance. Yeah. Victoria. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, ma'am. I had a few questions. Is it possible to have an acoustic fence that's higher than 3 meters, or is that not physically viable? Because I just wondered if it could be more like 4 meters that would satisfy. That was one question. The conditions say 12 HGVs a week. I think wasn't
Yes,
there
12 HGVs a year.
a year rather. Sorry, that does sound rather dramatic, doesn't it? Not I think 9 was mentioned as a number somewhere else. And perhaps it was in the presentation. And there was also perhaps a discrepancy that forklifts weren't going to be working on a Saturday, but in the condition it says they will be working from 9 till 12. So those were just my questions. Thank you.
I think that the 9 till 12 was a proposition put forward by the owner. We did originally say in the conditions that there would be no movements on Saturday, but it was felt that as the garden centre is open 7 days a week, that it would not be in their favour if they couldn't move stuff from the back. So it was between 9 and 1, I think, 10 till 1. And the other one?
I'll try and answer the question. So in terms of the 12 movements, yes, the noise report does refer to 9. Originally, we weren't going to put a limit on the number of HGV deliveries because it is a challenge in enforcement terms to try and keep a record. We've asked in the condition for the applicant to keep a record of HGV deliveries. So if we do have an issue, we can see the log and see how many there have been. So we've set it slightly higher at 12. Even at 12, we don't think that's going to cause an unacceptable impact if the control measures are in place. So rather than being rigid on 9, we've sort of gone a bit higher on 12. I think the concern was without some limitations, this could miraculously rise to, I think people talk about 1,000 HGV movements. I mean, the business would be doing very well if they had 1,000 HGV movements going in and out of that site. So we think that 12 limit is a sensible one. There is still discussion about the forklift movement times. The applicant would like a bit more flexibility on that. So that's something that the committee could consider today. So we've conceded on the HGV delivery times going 9 till 5 on the basis that they won't be going on the weekends, and we could align the forklift movements with those operations so that if a lorry does turn up, you can actually move the stock out of that lorry. It's just the Saturdays that I'm less keen to see early starts for forklift trucks because that could give rise to impact. So that's why we're suggesting 10 till 1. So it's a matter for you as a committee, but
acoustic fence.
And the acoustic fence point, yes. We have talked about taller fences in the past, but it's a fine balance because the higher you go, the more visual impact that fence will have. And 4 meters is quite a tall structure to go on the site. So we kind of felt the 3 meters achieves the necessary noise reductions without sort of having the significant visual impact. There will be landscape planting in front of that fence that will take some time to mature and establish. And there's a condition there to agree that landscaping scheme. But with those together, we think that will be an acceptable compromise.
Is that okay, Victoria? Yes.
Can I just raise one more point? Just thinking about the HGVs and the coast road being very busy, is it, and this I'm arguing against myself here, but if we're asking the HGVs to come in a later time when the coast road is more busy and is it going to have an adverse impact? I don't know. The local member thinks that.
No, don't think so. Davina, you wish to speak?
Hello, yeah, just to pick up on your point, with regard to the lorry HGV deliveries, it's something that can be restricted by the number of deliveries per calendar year, which is where there's been a concession on the Saturday. So there'll be no HGV deliveries on a Saturday, Sunday, bank or public holidays, and it would just be the working week, Monday to Friday. With regard to the forklift truck, my main concern is that this is a very flexible, very versatile piece of equipment, and we have no objections, obviously, to it being used on the main site, but obviously it can be used in a number of different ways on the application site. So really, it's about, whilst we cannot limit the number of movements of that piece of equipment, we are looking at the window which it would be operated within to try and create that level of acceptability overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Davina. Does that answer your questions, Victoria? Thank you. Councillor Troy. Sorry, do you want to say something? What now? Do you want to say something now, Mr.? Yes, well, now is a convenient time. You may speak from there if you want to. It's entirely up to you. Just put your microphone on.
Thank you,
please.
Chairman. Just to cover up, I mentioned in my presentation with just a query on I think 3 of the conditions, and they've mostly been covered in discussion. Certainly our request would be that condition 16, which is the forklift truck hours, is in line with the HGV times. That's say 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and in addition 9 to 1 on a Saturday. That would be our request to the committee. In relation to it hasn't been discussed, but condition 20 is in relation to staff parking. As drafted, it talks about that only taking place between 8:30 and 5:30 Monday to Saturday, and 9:30 and 4:45 on all other days. Our request, and it's something that we raised previously, was that is extended to effectively allow staff to enter and access that area to park their cars an hour before the opening times rather than 30 minutes. So that would be they can park there between 8 and 6 Monday to Saturday and 9 to 5 on other days. So that effectively gives an hour either side of the opening and closing times of the garden centre to allow staff to get in and out within an hour of either side of the opening of the garden centre. And the other one, if I may, is condition 12. Again, it's been discussed. I had a number of queries, but over the last few days, but most of which have been satisfied by Mr. Lyon in terms of his discussion and what he's presented to you today. The only point we do have, and I know it was a subject of discussion at the committee site inspection, is the glare, the sort of blue colour of some of the pallet covers. As drafted, the condition requires measures to reduce glare and reflection from stored pallets and materials. I think our concern would be if there's an expectation that those are covered and uncovered at regular intervals whilst they're being
mentioned, yes, at the meeting.
The point I made in correspondence with Mr. Lyon previously is that it would seem to me that and you might see from the plan, the proximity of that storage to the 3-meter acoustic fence, and the fact that over time the landscaping will grow sufficiently high. You can see where those areas are. It seems to me that those provisions will actually preclude views of those pallets. It seems to me that if there's an expectation through condition that we have some system of covering and uncovering them all at regular intervals, that's quite onerous. And it strikes me that the actual position of the storage relative to a 3-meter high fence pretty much covers that issue. That's all I have to say.
Presumably, the pallet storage is on this diagram at 4. Whereas before, the pallet storage, when we went round, was down where you've got number 2.
Indeed. So it's being positioned close to a 3-meter high fence, which will in effect create that obscuring the view of it. As I said, the concern is that if there's an expectation that it somehow has to be covered and uncovered.
It was mentioned because it was in such an obvious place.
Yes,
that a tarpaulin would be thrown over it as and when it was, they were delivered. I would just like to ask, how many staff cars do you reckon you have coming in? I mean, presumably it alters day by day because I presume a lot of the staff are part-time. But what's the average, would you say, the number of cars you have at any one time?
6 or 7, I'm told, Chairman.
Thank you. And I believe before that the problem was that the staff were arriving far too early. They were coming in at 7 in the morning, probably slightly before that. People do get a bit, it's nice to have people who are so eager to get to work. But we have to be aware that there are neighbours and, you know, to have, I know because my neighbour actually, when he used to go off at 6 o'clock in the morning, now that's just one person beside me. Yes.
Yeah, in response to that, I have had a general manager that does arrive on site at 7 o'clock. We have now put in place that he's not to access that, the application sites before 8 o'clock in the morning. Should he need to be there earlier than 8 o'clock.
He can park in the front.
Yes, yes, and that's what we've put in place. So as of what we've been doing currently since all of this has gone on, is that no person is to access that application site before the hours of 8 o'clock in the morning. But it was only ever one person. If it
But
was,
it just needs one person.
it just needs one person indeed.
I've experienced that. Right, and anyway, you've got chains across, haven't you, which will be
Yes.
released at the appropriate
Yes.
time. Thank you. Do we need anything else from that? That one through those conditions?
It's really then a matter of whether the committee agreed to the applicant's request to amend, particularly on the forklift truck hours. And suggesting 9 till 5 Monday to Friday and 9 till 1 on a Saturday. I think we probably could agree to 9 till 5 on the Monday to Friday. It's the Saturday bit that's the bit that whether that additional hour causes any additional harm really. And it's always difficult to quantify what is the harm of one additional hour, but it's a decision for you as committee members really. So,
Well, let's carry on with our discussions from members and then we can ponder that one.
okay.
Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The acoustic fencing, it says in there, design and specification to be agreed. Now, obviously, we need something that's going to go up fairly quickly to have the effect, but given that it's a garden centre, could it also have some natural features that would then go on it? So that clearly that's for discussion later on. I'm requesting that that's something that's considered when we look at the design and construction of that, because that in itself may reduce the height and it's do wildlife stuff, reduce noise, it be absorbent in itself. So yeah, so I think, you know, whilst I accept we have to have a structure that goes up, that it should be a structure that could be planted in or whatever but that needs our specialists to soften it down, which I think will help with the glare, the noise and everything else. So I don't know if Jeff wants to do that first.
I can come back on that. So I mean, the purpose of the sort of 9 metre planting strip is to soften the impact of that fencing. And in condition 8, which is the landscape scheme, we've asked for some details of any batten barn owl boxes or batten bird boxes to be installed within the buffer strip to try and enhance the biodiversity value of that area as well.
I just think that the acoustic barrier, you know, needs to be made best use of. So
Yeah, I mean the acoustic barrier has to meet sort of design specifications. So the density of the wood needs to be certain. I think it's about 10 kilograms per square metre to do its function. So we wouldn't want to do anything that interferes with its primary function room.
Okay, the only other thing, if I can carry on, Madam Chair. Thank you. The other thing was, I'm pleased to see the softening of hours. When I read the conditions, I felt they were potentially onerous on someone who's been there 50 years. So I'm pleased to see that we're coming to agreement on that, on the hours, and thank you to everybody that's worked to balance this out for a business that has been there for a long while. I think it's should be noted that they've done this work to try and work with the near community that's arrived on their doorstep. So having said all that, I'd be happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Seconded. The proposal to approve is seconded by Councillor Toy. Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank officers and the applicants for putting so much effort into getting something that is largely acceptable. Just a couple of comments. I mean, firstly, on the landscape planting, I'm presuming that will be native species.
I should jolly well hope so.
Precisely, that's what I'm asking.
I think we can specify that. No Leylandii, please.
I'd like to think the applicant's got some good contacts on landscape.
Yes, besides the Aletta Gardens, they just should be able to get this spot on. Secondly, just looking at the potential noise levels, we're looking at probably less than 1 HGV every month. I mean, that's hardly an excessive amount of large wagons moving in and out of that yard.
But we're going, well, it's between 9 and 12, isn't
Yeah,
it?
so around about one a month.
Possibly.
It's not 2 or 3 in a week.
Yeah.
So I can't see a huge issue. It'll be concentrated at certain times. And yes, you've got the noise of forklift as well during unloading. But at other times, it just seems to me that good management of the site can restrict the amount of times the forklift is going to have to be moving in and out, moving pallets around. It's not something that's going to be going on the whole of the working day. So I think the restrictions as proposed are probably okay. I've got no problem with that. So I'm happy to go with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to add to the comments that people have made that this is a good example of how the applicant and officers can work together, and also to Mr. Tassie for his considerable cooperation and politeness in his email that he submitted. I'm just querying something regarding the landscaping scheme. It's obviously designed to act as a buffer to suppress noise. It's also got another function, and that is to provide some screening. We've heard from Mr. Tassie that HGVs, because of their height, can see over the fence currently. I'm just wondering, how long will this landscape buffer actually take to mature? How long will it take to get to the height of the fence and above? Because reason I ask is that a lot of developers on estates now use this trellising with vegetation already to a considerable height, and I'm sure the applicant, given the nature of the business, will know exactly what I'm referring to. Would it be possible to include that initially until landscaping matures?
Any landscaping where you're planting native trees and bushes will take at least 5 years to start to mature. And then you've only got to look at when you plant things in your own garden, because it not only needs to grow upwards, it needs to bush out. The other thing with the landscaping is that it provides a corridor for wildlife, which is extremely important.
Yeah.
And I believe the applicants themselves realise this, that this is an important factor. And depending on, there are certain types of bushes and trees which are recommended anyway for natural hedges, which our landscape officers will be able to advise on.
Yeah.
I've not heard of this other thing you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I have actually seen it in situ in certain places. So I was thinking that this could be provided, conditioned in addition to what is already proposed as a temporary stopgap until the landscaping matures, just to give a little bit of additional privacy to Mr. Tassie.
Right. I'll bring you in a minute. I want Jeff to just answer.
I mean, the success of any landscaping scheme depends on the medium that you're putting into. If you have poor soil to start with, it won't take very well. So that's why we've got conditions talking about ground preparation and cultivation. There is a danger, the bigger the plant stock you put in there, the higher the risk of failure, because they need more maintenance to keep them going if you've got heavy standards in there. So that's why often people put smaller plants in, because they take a bit longer, but actually they establish more successfully usually. We've got a condition in there saying that they need to be anything that would sort of die within 10 years would need to be replaced, which is typical for what we would do across the district. So I think what's proposed would be sufficient, but I mean, if the applicant is happy to agree some kind of interim solution, then I don't think we'd want to say no to that if that was possible.
Yeah, what I have in mind would actually, if you like, provide an instant screen as soon as it's installed. The vegetation's there.
There's a cost factor here. Mr. Presley would like to come in.
Yes, John, if I may, we already have a landscape architect lined up to prepare a scheme, and we did have in mind including, noting what Mr. Lyons said about heavy standards. The larger the size of the initial plants, the proportionate increase in failure, but it is our intention to include some standard species. So there will be some larger, there won't just be whips. So there'll be a mixture with including perhaps some standards. We don't know exactly what there will be. We'll be advised by our landscape architect on that, but it is the intention. It won't just be entirely whips, which will take a long time. There will be some standards in there as well. So it will hopefully have a sort of speedier presence than if we were just putting in whip plants.
Yeah, thank you. Does that answer your questions, Andrew? Thank you. Councillor Withington.
Thank you. My question is to do with the forklift hours, really. The applicants obviously requested that they brought in line with the HGV hours, but I think I'm interested in the Saturday, because my concern is obviously weekends are probably the busiest time for a business such as the garden centre, and I presume that the forklift is used to move stock from that storage area to the main site. So I think limiting that could have an impact on the business's ability on a really busy Saturday to function. So that's my concern if we're going just for 10 till 1.
Well, I presume that they must have a reasonable idea of how much stock you normally get through at a weekend, and if they pre-plan, that should be no problem, Liz. I wouldn't have thought so. What do you think, Jeff?
I mean, we have umdenard quite a bit over these conditions and trying to sort of balance the interests of every party, because we have to respect the neighbours' amenities are also important to try and consider here. That's why we went with a 10 till 1. Initially, we were thinking, should we have any movements? But I think the point you made about making sure the business isn't detrimentally affected by not being able to move things. It's when there's HGVs coming in 9 to 5 on a Monday to Friday, that you need to have the HGV active. But with the stock movement, there is the ability to foresee what's going on. And if you need to move some stock late on a Saturday morning, ready for Sunday trading, that's possible to do within the realms of this condition. We're not saying you can't do anything on a Saturday. We're saying, yeah, just do it a bit later than a 9 o'clock start. But it's a choice for you as a committee. If you say you want to accept a 9 o'clock start for forklifts on a Saturday, that's a choice that you can make as a committee. It's in your gift to influence how we draft those conditions. We've just advised 10 to 1 based on discussions with environmental health. But Davina's here if you have any questions on that.
Did you not mention that we would alter the forklift truck hours, Jeff?
Yeah, so I mean, the applicants asked for 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, which
no, 10 till 4:30 Monday to. Oh, the applicant wants 9 till 5.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we probably could agree to. It's the Saturday condition that's the one that it's the extra hour in the morning that's been debated. But do you want to bring in Davina? Because I'm sure that's
Davina, what do you think about this?
In summary, what we know from the noise report and from our own monitoring is that background noise levels in the area are very low, and certainly at particular times of the day. This is a very versatile piece of equipment, and nobody has any qualms at all about how it's used on the original site. It is purely this small application site that we're talking about. The forklift truck can still be used as needed on the main site itself. We are just looking at the small application site. So that's why we have recommended these hours. Again, it's to do with proximity, it's to do with the frequency of use and how versatile this is in terms of reducing the amount of manual handling and reducing the amount that staff have to do by hand. By using a forklift truck, it is there. One of its main uses is to reduce the impact on staff and having to lift, maneuver things around. So by giving these hours, we hope to be able to achieve that right balance.
So you're recommending the 9 till 5 then, are you? Or you?
So on the Saturday, the 10 o'clock.
10 till, right, okay. We okay with that, members?
Sorry, Madam Chair. Sorry, Chairman, sorry.
How can you
Yeah,
mumble?
having been through that, would it be possible just to summarise where we're sitting now? Because
Right,
we've been,
okay.
so if I do it and then you correct me, is that helpful?
Well, absolutely, John.
So what we're saying is 9 to 5 for HGVs and forklift trucks Monday to Friday, and the forklift trucks 10 till 1 on a Saturday. That's my understanding of where we've landed with that. I'd like to
That's it.
confirm that. Okay, fine, that's that, and I'm happy with
Can I
that.
just ask the
Thank
members
you.
if you're okay with that? That alteration? Thank you. Right, does anybody else wish to speak? No, well then we'll go to the vote. This is to approve. The recommendation is to approve this application with its draft conditions of 23. Which one or two things still have to be discussed. And we'll now go to the vote. So it's for, against and abstain. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Fisher?
For.
It's an abstention from Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Councillor Grove-Jones?
For.
Councillor Heinrich?
For.
Councillor Holiday? For. Councillor Kershaw?
For.
Councillor Taylor? Councillor Toy?
For.
Councillor Withington? For. That is 9 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you. This is approved. Thank you for your patience. For everyone, thank you, Mr. Tassie. And that's that can go down in your memories when you came to the right. Are we carry on? Do you want to carry on, BW? Victoria's going. Thank you, Davina. It's what? Oh, this is this man again, is that?
We're still live streaming.
Well, we're not. Right, thank you. We have now the next application is Dylan RVs /21//3306 and a variation of a condition being presented by our one and only Officer Lyon.
Right, so this is item 10 on page 23 of your agenda. So what we're looking at here is a variation of a previous application, so variation of condition 2 for a change of a material from a galvanized steel to oak structure. I'll lance this issue first because I know some members may want to ask what is a fire escape, when is a fire escape not a fire escape, and all those sorts of questions. For planning purposes, we're not dealing with a fire escape access here. It did mention the word fire escape on the plans previously, but it's not a building control fire escape. So it's not required to satisfy colleagues in building control, nor would they ask for a fire escape on a development of this type. So please, we don't need to get involved in discussing the fire escape issue. The key issue is whether the change from a galvanized stair structure that was in the previous application, replacing it with an oak structure, is acceptable in planning terms. And as set out in your report, there are no planning reasons to object to this proposed change.
Let me see the pictures. Oh, there we are. Coming up straight away. Thank you.
Just cycle through them. Yeah. So yeah, that's if it's case of previous plan. So yeah, so you can see on here where the fire escape is on the plans. So it's called a fire escape, but it's not a fire escape. So that's the location of that. When is a fire escape not a fire escape? So if you just go to the next couple of slides, there's some pictures of of what it looks like. Yeah, and yeah, so here's what it looks like as built. So it's a retrospective application, so they're seeking to regularize it, so.
It has a modesty screen up here, as you can see the top of it. To stop any overlooking on the neighbours.
So our recommendation is one of approval, Chair.
We have no, I know, I'm just going to check this. We have no speakers on this one. Right. And the local members are Councillor Mancini Boyle and Councillor Dixon, but they're not required to make any comment because this was brought forward by the Assistant Planning Director. So it's just purely for us to look at and decide. I think the problem with this one was with the wording fire escape, because it isn't a fire escape. And you wouldn't necessarily have a wooden fire escape. And the interior fire exit is through the existing upstairs holiday let, I think it is, and then down through the rest of the building, which presumably, if it was on fire, wouldn't exactly be a fire escape, would it? So you then get back to the idea that you now have a wooden stairwell, which would take you down to the ground floor. And that's what we need to decide whether we will accept this. And it has been in place, it looks like, for some little time.
It has, and say that the permission previously granted that staircase and platforms, so that's already been given permission. It's just a material change that we're talking about.
Yeah, so it's gone from galvanized steel and it's gone to wood, which is strange. Well, anyway, that's up to them. Yes, I've got two members, Councillor Heinrich and Councillor Brown, wish to speak on this.
Councillor Toy as well. Yeah.
And Councillor Toy. Right, Paul.
Yeah. We're advised it's not a fire escape. Fair enough, it's simply a timber access stairway, so I don't see any issue. I'm happy to propose we accept the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
So you're proposing. Councillor Heinrich's proposing acceptance. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to second that proposal. This is a non-material amendment. It's probably a sort of a misnomer typographical error that fire escape has been put on the plan, which has been sort of slightly misleading at first glance, but the officer has clarified it. I don't really see any other issues here than are in the report.
You wanted to speak?
I have read and get about just imposing the issue about the privacy screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as this is a what we call a section 73 application, which is basically variation of condition, it's creating a new planning permission. So if there are any conditions on the original application relating to the modesty screen, they'll need to be reimposed. I don't know whether the officers picked those up, but we'll check that and make sure the conditions include those.
Thank you, Councillor Toy.
I think it's all been said, Madam Chair. Building control laid it out. What's a fire escape? What's not? What's needed? So I've nothing further to add. Thank you.
Richard, did you want to say anything, or are you just gesticulating? You know, as one does. Right. Thank you. Gosh, I won't say it. That was very quick. So we have a proposal to accept the officer's recommendation for approval, proposed by Councillor Heinrich, seconded by Councillor Brown. And nobody else wishes to speak. We'll now go to the vote, then for, against and abstain. Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Grove-Jones.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Toy.
For.
And Councillor Withington.
For.
That's unanimous, 9 votes for.
Thank you. So that's accepted. Thank you very much. And I think that brings us almost to the complete section. There's no need to exclude Press and public, of course, they've gone. There's no private business, I don't think. Any urgent exempt business, Lauren?